guys, welcome back to Daytoday Chess. This is Sabina and you are on Subscribers Week. For today, I've decided to choose one of my mom's games because she's a subscriber. Otherwise, of course, I wouldn't have chosen her game on Subscribers Week, of course. And I chose a game that she played against, with black, against women's grandmaster Stojanovic Andjelija from Serbia in the European Women's Team Chess Championship. This was today's game. My mom has black, and my mom is a women's grandmaster and international master, of course. So very proud of her, of today's game. So let's check it out and see why I chose this game and why it is such an important game. We have seen this opening before. And I don't believe we have seen d4 here in this position. This is called the Max Lange gambit. And what's so special about this gambit? Well, it attacks the bishop, the pawn. You can't just move the bishop, so you pretty much have to accept the gambit. That's basically what I wanted to say. Now, white captures back, knight takes d4. And now what's going on is that this knight from f3 was traded off the board, so now white has the opportunity of playing f4, undermining this knight in d4, but in the same time opening the rook and the bishop on f7. So this is something very important you have to note. And black has only one move here, unless you want to lose. d6 is the only choice. So d6 to strengthen the pawn in e5. Max Lange was a strong player in the 1850s. And he invented this gambit with white, right? So he actually had some games in this. Otherwise, we wouldn't have continued giving the name of this gambit, given his name. So the problem with knight e6, for example, to just move the knight away, is that you're actually losing instantaneously. After f takes e5, white gets the pawn back. You have to move the knight, and you really don't have spaces besides going to g8. And actually, bishop takes e6 could win here, because after captures, we can just trade the queens, taking f7. This pawn is weak. Bishop g5 is coming. You know, this position is just amazing for white, and you're totally underdeveloped with black. But actually, Max Lange just went for the rook sacrifice, a very brilliant idea. After king takes, check. Queen d5 check, king e7 check, another check. You have to play knight f6, and he didn't even hurry getting that knight back. He played with the rook down for quite some time, playing knight c3, then brought the rook to f1. Anyways, it's a really cool game, so if you're interested in this gambit, be sure to check some of his games in the 1800s. But these days, everybody knows, of course, so you won't encounter anybody playing knight e6, but it's still cool to watch those games and see some interesting creative ideas. d6 takes with the pawn, of course, so now black has strengthened its center, has a pawn in the center, the knight in d4 stays well. So what's going on with white? Does he still have some ideas? Of course he does. Bishop g5 is the idea. So now we are pinning the knight. In the same time, we're threatening to take in f6, double the pawns, and then once this knight is off the board, queen h5 can come, pressure in f7. You know, this position becomes very dynamic and in white's favor in a way, because white has a very easy development, whereas black would have to find some nice way to finish up your development. It's not very clear which side you're going to castle. Queen e7 is a move, one of the best moves here. Bishop e6 has been played before, and then if you take, of course, pawn takes, and even though I have those double pawns, I don't worry that much about it. If you take in e6, I take with the knight. I have some ideas with knight f4. I would like to trade queens or not trade queens. Queen e7, maybe castle long. And even if I lose this f6 pawn, I will try to have some attack on the g file and the opportunity of having my knight active. This position should be quite alright for black. But my mom went for queen e7. This is another possibility here, and knight a3. The idea of this move, like my arrows already point out, is that what white wants to do is play c3, chase this knight away, because this knight here doesn't do very much, but it's just closing the file, so black, after moving this bishop to e6, could castle long. So white really wants to stop black as long as possible to castle long, so that's why white wants to play c3, so the knight goes away, and then you know, the d8 square is controlled. But in the same time, this knight defends the bishop in c4, and if you don't play bishop e6 to try to trade it, I could have some ideas to bring the knight via c2, e3, and then be able to come on any one of these nice outposts. So it's very important to know the difference between this knight in a3 and if white would have played knight c3, because here after knight c3, bishop e6, even if you take in f6, I take back, your knight in c3 doesn't do as much really, and your bishop is attacked, so you basically kind of have to make this trade or put a piece in d5, but it really doesn't matter. Like, for example, knight d5, we can even take, bishop takes, and now long castle. So black managed to do what she wanted to do, to castle long, and we have a good knight versus this bishop doesn't do much, and we still have a pawn up. So definitely knight c3 is not a good choice for white. So knight a3, if you're playing this with white, you should be aware of this knight a3 idea. Bishop e6, c3, chasing the knight away, and now black doesn't want to go back to c6, because this knight from c6 wouldn't really have many ideas where are you going to go next. So that is the reason why after c3, my mom captured in c4 first, a very good move, and now bishop takes f6. Okay, that is a move that white has to do pretty much at some point, if g takes f6, now white could have taken in c4. This is basically what could have happened in the game, and then knight e6, let's say white could have played b4 and then bring the knight e3 towards d4 towards f5. But in the game, bishop f6 was played a little bit later. White actually captured knight takes c4. So this allowed black to go knight e6, and now my knight is really good here. I'm also opening up the diagonal, having some queen c5 check knight ideas, of course, threatening the bishop, forcing white to actually capture in f6, as otherwise there's queen f5 check knight, right? And here we don't take back with the pawn, because this is normally what it would happen, you know. That's why white had to take earlier in f6. Now black is not forced to take back, so black does not need to get those pawns doubled. In fact, I have this nice intermediate move, queen c5, check. You have to go there, and now I'm not taking the bishop to double my pawns and remain knight versus knight. In fact, I take your knight now, and now we have bishop versus knight. The position seems quite equal, and normally when there are pawns on both flanks, the bishop should be slightly stronger than the knight, provided the position is quite open, which this one is. But the problem for white is that she has an isolated pawn in e4, and that will be the point for black. That will be the idea, the main idea, the centerpiece of black. Black is going to focus their pieces to attack the pawn in e4, eventually win it, hopefully, and then have some chances to win this game. So in this particular position right now at this moment, black is slightly better because of that pawn. So bishop knight is not that strong anymore, because white has that weakness, and this knight in e6 is a super good piece defending both sides. And let's see how the game went on. Queen f3. Queen d5 actually was tried in this position before, but after queen a6, eventually the game between Smirin and Kolovic in 2009 ended in a draw, so you might want to check that game out. But queen f3 was played in this game. Rook 8 to d8, a very natural move, bringing the rook on the only open file and then having some ideas to activate the rook on the second rank. b3, queen c6. And in this position, if I were white, I probably would be thinking to play queen g4, try to bring some rook on the third rank, maybe try to attack, make sure my pawn in e4 was protected. But of course, black probably would have, my mom would have played rook d2, keep the rook active, and just have still a slightly better position. The idea is, of course, to eventually win that e4 pawn. But in this position, women's grandmaster Stojanovic Andjelija went for h4, which I think was a little bit over-optimistic. Is also weakening white's camp. So let's see how my mom started slowly improving her position from here. f6 first, chasing the bishop away. Now I said e4 was the weakness in this position, so knight c5, putting pressure. And white would not have enough possibility to defend that pawn much enough, so it's better to try to get rid of it. And that's exactly what she did. She played e5, trying to trade the pawn and get rid of the weakness, and then there's nothing more to fight with black in this position. So my mom, very good, traded queens, and now e5. Why is this so good? Because now, once the queens are traded off, what black wants to do is trade off the rooks as well, bring the king to e6, bring this knight to d7 or d3, and capture the pawn, and afterwards the king-pawn endgame is going to be winning. Well, that in theory is super easy, but let's see how it worked in practice. White decided to play e6 and give away that pawn. At least the bishop would be active, keeping a c7 attacked and keeping black's pieces a little bit under on the defending side. But even if you don't push that pawn, I told you what my plan is. I'll be able with black to get to with the king to e6. First we play g6, of course, bring the king. That pawn is going to be lost eventually, so it's better to give it away sooner than too late. Okay, rook e8, making sure the knight is protected, the pawn is protected, and the position of blacks is safe. h5, this is a good idea to try to get some more pawns off the board, because of course white would like to trade as many pawns as possible, and then eventually will give away the bishop for the pawn and it will be a draw. But that is not very easy. This bishop e5 is basically against bishop king to f7, because then rook h8 doesn't do anything, right? But when the opponent has a dark square bishop and it's an endgame, we try to put our pieces on the opposite color of that bishop, of course. So rook f7, we have to keep the pieces as much as we can on the opposite color so that we don't fall into any traps. Rook f7 is a very good idea. The rook protects c7, has some rook h7 ideas, has some rook e7 ideas, you know. It's a really good move. Bishop d4, okay. b6, I'm not giving away anything. Anyways, you couldn't take it, but just in case. Now, rook h7 check. Probably c5 was a better choice here. And when you move the bishop, now rook e7, try to get the rooks traded off on the e-file, and then it would be kind of simple for black to start pushing these pawns towards promotion and then eventually activate the king. But rook h7 was played by my mom, now bringing the king towards the center. Knight g7, I want to trade pieces, and anyways, I was on that pin, I don't like to stay on pins. Rook e7, just making sure I'm not giving away any piece. Knight e8, a very good move. Now, my mom is improving the position of the knight. In g7 it wasn't doing much, so now we're trying to bring it towards e4 if we can. c5, knight f6, now we have also some knight g4 ideas, of course. Rook a3, so white is trying, like I said, to trade as many pawns as possible. Capture, rook takes a7. If you would have captured in c5, I could play, of course, this knight e4, hop, hop. What do you do if you go bishop d4? Well, I can go c6, that pawn is protected. Now you have created another weakness for yourself. So rook a7 was a better choice to have more pawns traded off the board, which was a good approach from white's perspective. Takes, knight d5, good. Bishop here. Now rook a4, we want to make sure the pawn will be well protected, but white found this nice move, a3, to trade the last pawn on that side and then be able to just focus on the king side. We have to trade that pawn, otherwise b3 probably will be losing that pawn after rook b1. Okay, so let's see from here on how my mom played. First, activated her rook on the second rank. Probably I would have brought my knight here first, just to make sure that rook is closed, the knight is super strong, and start pushing. But she went rook a2, which, okay, g4. We don't want to trade one more pawn to make it easy for white. Rook a6. Now rook a3, and white played rook e4 trying to win that pawn, and probably thought that after rook e3 the endgame would be a draw. And actually it would have been. Takes, king g2, king e6, very good move, attacking the bishop, and here white blundered. Had white played bishop d4, the position would have finished in a draw, because after king f5, going for the pawn, king f3, king takes g5, now white has to make a really good move, and that move is king e4. This is the only move that saves the game, because attacking the knight, if you move the knight, of course I take the pawn, and if you push the pawn, I go bishop f2. And I will be able to win that pawn and make a draw, then give away the bishop for the pawn and make a draw. But instead white blundered, went for bishop g3 here, and this is the way the game ended, knight g2, and now white has no more way to stop that pawn from promoting. I hope you enjoyed this game. Stay tuned for more.